They told you sex was sinful, shameful, or meaningless. But what if it's a sacred portal, a gateway to profound understanding? What if everything you've been taught about sexuality was meticulously designed to prevent you from unlocking one of the most potent avenues for spiritual awakening and self-discovery? From the moment you were cognizant enough to inquire, the answers you received were often tinged with guilt, veiled in fear, or met with dismissive mockery. You were conditioned to perceive sex as either something to be diligently avoided or a commodity to be casually consumed, but rarely, if ever, as something to be deeply revered. And perhaps somewhere deep within your intuition, you felt the inherent contradiction. You sensed an essential element was missing, not merely in the physical act itself, but in the very narrative the world relentlessly promoted. Because sex is not an entity separate from spirit, rather it is a vibrant expression of energy, a repository of ancestral memory, and a catalyst for alchemical transformation. When approached with mindfulness and conscious intention, it possesses the extraordinary power to unlock dimensions of your being that no religious institution, academic textbook, or digital screen could ever reveal. This is where the authentic narrative begins to unfold. From the instant you became aware of your physical form, societal conditioning began subtly shaping your perception of what that body signified. Long before you grasped the concept of energy, before you understood the profound nuances of desire, authentic connection, or the essence of spirit, you were handed a predetermined script. A script meticulously crafted not to empower your inherent potential, but rather to systematically suppress it. In the structured environments of schools, within the confines of your childhood home, through the doctrines of organized religion, pervasive media influence, and even in the unspoken glances exchanged between adults who had long succumbed to the same programming, you were relentlessly told what sex was supposed to be: dirty, dangerous, sinful, or, conversely, casual, meaningless, purely physical, a source of inherent guilt or a superficial game, but never a doorway, never a sacred experience. As a child, you were naturally imbued with curiosity, radiating innocence, and energetically open to the boundless possibilities of life. However, that very openness rendered you vulnerable, not merely to external influence, but to insidious manipulation. You were subtly taught to dissociate the tangible physical realm from the intangible spiritual domain, to artificially bifurcate the body from the soul, to compartmentalize the multifaceted dimensions of love from the perceived baseness of lust, and to rigidly separate the pursuit of pleasure from the concept of purity. In countless cultures across the globe, these limiting messages were transmitted not necessarily with overt malice, but often with a deeply ingrained underlying fear, a fear painstakingly inherited from generations of pervasive suppression and shame. Well-intentioned parents didn't always consciously recognize the detrimental patterns they were unwittingly reinforcing. But the ultimate effect remained tragically the same. You gradually began to internalize the insidious idea that your inherent sexual energy was either something to be meticulously concealed or a commodity to be cynically sold. The system as a whole actively discouraged you from perceiving your sexuality as something intrinsically sacred, precisely because sacred sexuality embodies authentic power. Real power, not the superficial dominance or manipulative control so often glorified in contemporary society, but genuine spiritual force. And an individual who learns to consciously work in harmony with that profound force becomes exceedingly difficult to manipulate, control, or deceive. They begin a process of profound awakening. They start to question the prevailing narratives. They begin to remember their authentic essence, who they truly are at their core. In ancient cultures, sexuality was not a taboo subject relegated to the shadows. It was intricately woven into the very fabric of spiritual life and practice. In Tantra, for example, the sexual act was not merely a physical interaction, but a profound practice, a sacred ceremony, a heartfelt prayer, a merging of the masculine and feminine energies both within ourselves and between individuals. Taoist sexual alchemy viewed the sexual act as a potent means to cultivate qi, the vital life force energy, for the purpose of promoting longevity, fostering boundless creativity, and achieving profound enlightenment. Egyptian and Hermetic traditions spoke eloquently of sacred energy exchange, the alchemical transmutation of base energies into higher states, and the ultimate attainment of divine union. However, this invaluable wisdom has been deliberately buried, systematically demonized, derisively mocked, reduced to mere footnotes in history, or transformed into fetishized fragments of its former glory, while the masses are relentlessly fed a distorted narrative that portrays sexuality as either something inherently shameful or something inherently superficial. Because when sex is reduced to a shallow act devoid of meaning and intention, you become exponentially easier to control and manipulate. When it's artificially severed from spirit and authentic connection, it becomes a mere distraction, rather than a legitimate path to self-discovery and spiritual growth. You're left perpetually chasing fleeting moments of superficial stimulation while simultaneously being starved of authentic, meaningful connection. The predictable result? A society paradoxically addicted to sex, yet simultaneously terrified of genuine intimacy, flooded with hypersexualized imagery, yet desperately starving for authentic truth. And deep beneath the surface of this societal dysfunction, you instinctively sense it. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Some truths, especially those that challenge the established order, cannot be shared openly on mainstream platforms like YouTube without risking censorship. The real danger lies not in sex itself, but in forgetting its true purpose and potential. Sexual energy, when suppressed, denied, or distorted, becomes a potent weapon wielded against you. It's insidiously used to sell you products you don't truly need, to keep you perpetually distracted from what truly matters, and to cultivate a pervasive sense of unfulfilled longing. However, when you consciously reclaim that extraordinary energy and channel it with mindful intention, it transforms into a powerful current of liberation. It reconnects you to your soul's purpose. It reveals profound truths that cannot be adequately conveyed through mere words, but can only be experienced viscerally, felt deeply, and integrated through embodied living. And so you inevitably begin to question the status quo. If the version of sex you were taught was demonstrably incomplete and inherently flawed, what else have you been led to believe that is equally untrue? What transformative possibilities might unfold when you cease perceiving sex as a problem to be solved or a temptation to be resisted, and instead embrace it as a sacred portal to be consciously entered? What profound changes might awaken within you not merely on a physical level, but energetically, emotionally, and spiritually? When you finally grant yourself permission to allow the full, authentic truth of your being to emerge, remember that the programming you've been subjected to runs exceedingly deep. But the truth resides even deeper still, waiting patiently to be rediscovered. And you are not here by accident, nor are you alone in this awakening. You've already intuitively felt the pervasive emptiness inherent in the mainstream societal narrative. Now you're beginning to discern the subtle yet undeniable pull of something else, something ancient, something inherently sacred, something profoundly transformative, waiting to be remembered, reclaimed, and integrated. They told you sex was a merely physical act, a mechanical process driven solely by hormones, base instinct, or predetermined biological programming. Perhaps they even conceded it was about love in its most superficial form. Perhaps they acknowledged it was about pleasure in its most fleeting sense. But what they conveniently omitted, what they were actively discouraged from revealing, is that sex is, at its core, pure, raw, intelligent, transformative energy. The very kind of potent energy that catalyzed your creation in the first place, and that can crack open your consciousness and profoundly shift the trajectory of your spiritual evolution if you learn how to consciously work with it, rather than against it. You intuitively feel it, even if you haven't always possessed the appropriate vocabulary to articulate it. That undeniable surge of energy before climax, the palpable electric current running between two bodies in harmonious resonance, the profound way a simple touch can make your skin remember things your conscious mind has long forgotten. This isn't mere emotion, it transcends simple biology. It's a matter of frequency, of energetic vibration. It's life force itself. It's chi, prana, kundalini, different names across diverse cultures, all pointing to the same fundamental hidden truth. Sexual energy is arguably the most potent spiritual force we inherently carry because it is essentially the very same energy that created you, that sustains you, and that connects you to the divine. But instead of being taught to understand this profound energy, to cultivate it consciously, and to channel it wisely, you are actively taught to discharge it mindlessly, to waste it frivolously, to repress it shamefully, or to chase it obsessively. You were instructed to numb it artificially, to suppress it actively, or to pour it meaninglessly into empty experiences, severing it from any sense of authentic meaning, genuine reverence, or spiritual significance. You were systematically denied the knowledge of how to circulate this vital energy through your entire body, how to utilize it for profound healing on multiple levels, and how to allow it to rise consciously into the heart, the throat, the crown chakra, thereby awakening dormant aspects of your subtle energy body that most people unfortunately never access in an entire lifetime. Because if you did, you wouldn't just experience fleeting moments of superficial pleasure. You would feel authentic, sustainable power, unwavering clarity, and profound spiritual awakening, and that is decidedly not conducive to a world that profits immensely from your collective numbness and spiritual amnesia. The human body is far more than mere flesh and bone. It is an intricate energetic system, a highly sensitive instrument composed of various frequencies and dynamic energy flows. You are not simply skin and muscle. You are, in essence, a dynamic field of energy in constant motion and transformation. And sexual energy, when consciously activated with presence, intention, and reverence, moves through this complex system like a sacred fire. It clears stagnant blocks, amplifies innate intuition, and softens the hardened aspects of your being that the world has tried to calcify and turn to stone. This is precisely why in numerous ancient spiritual systems across the globe, sex was never considered a casual act. It was a deeply sacred, highly intentional ceremony, because they intrinsically understood what you are only now beginning to rediscover, that when two beings intentionally meet with conscious presence, authentic vulnerability, and mutual respect, the act of union transcends the merely physical and becomes a profound ritual of alchemical transformation. In those sacred moments, energy flows far beyond the confines of the physical form. Breath becomes a bridge connecting hearts and souls. Eye contact becomes a powerful conduit for transmitting unspoken truths. Sound becomes vibration, unlocking deeply buried aspects of the self stored within the intricate network of the nervous system. You are not merely touching a body. You are, in effect, touching a soul, a history, a tapestry of interconnected patterns, a unique unfolding story, and they, in turn, are touching yours. However, when this profound exchange is conducted unconsciously, without mindful intention, it can often leave behind residual confusion, energetic fragmentation, and lingering energetic residue. You may inexplicably feel drained, mentally foggy, or inexplicably anxious without consciously understanding why. You may be unconsciously carrying lingering echoes of individuals you barely knew, because sex is never merely a physical act of touch. It's an energetic transfer, a profound exchange on multiple levels. And once that exchange has occurred, it doesn't simply vanish into thin air with a casual goodbye. What most people colloquially refer to as chemistry is, in reality, energetic resonance, the tangible alignment or misalignment of vibrational frequencies. It's precisely why some individuals feel instantly familiar, inexplicably intoxicating, and magnetically alluring, while others leave you feeling inexplicably repulsed. And it's also the very reason that the same potent energy can devolve into utter chaos, if not consciously approached with mindful awareness and deep respect. You are not merely reacting to an external person. You are, in truth, responding to a complex vibrational pattern that your body instinctively recognizes long before your conscious mind is able to logically comprehend it. And when this potent energy is misused, abused, or treated with reckless abandon, you don't merely pay for it on an emotional level. You ultimately pay for it on a profound energetic level as well. However, when it's consciously honored, when sexual energy is intentionally regarded for what it truly represents, it transforms into the very foundation for deep, lasting transformation. It becomes the sustainable fuel for authentic spiritual growth, rather than merely a fleeting distraction from it. When consciously channeled through the intricate pathways of the subtle body, it can awaken dormant aspects of your consciousness that you never even realized existed. It can elevate your overall state of being, bringing you into a state of profound presence where the illusion of linear time seemingly collapses into an eternal now. These are not mere myths, esoteric theories, or unattainable ideals. They are tangible experiences readily available to anyone who consciously chooses to reclaim the forgotten wisdom and intentionally embody it in their daily lives. Because once you fundamentally understand that sex is, at its core, pure energy, everything begins to shift into a higher perspective. The superficial goal is no longer mere release. It consciously evolves into authentic connection, heightened awareness, and profound spiritual expansion. You begin to consciously feel your inherent energy rising, your physical body softening, and your overall perception sharpening into greater clarity. You are not escaping from reality. You are, in fact, consciously entering into a more complete, authentic, and fulfilling version of it. And suddenly, sex is no longer merely an act. It's a profound practice, a form of moving meditation, a powerful mirror reflecting your inner landscape, and a tangible remembering of your authentic essence. And in that sacred remembering, you don't merely find fleeting moments of superficial pleasure, you find the truest expression of yourself. Sex doesn't simply end when the physical bodies part. It consciously lingers in your mind, within your memories, and more profoundly, within your energetic field. You've likely felt it yourself. That strange heaviness after an intimate encounter that somehow felt off. That subtle emotional fog that creeps in unexpectedly days later. The persistent phantom pull of someone you no longer actively speak to, yet still inexplicably feel connected to. This isn't mere sentimentality, it's an energetic imprint because sex, at its core, is not merely a physical act. It is fundamentally an energetic exchange. And energy by its very nature doesn't simply forget or dissipate into nothingness. Every time you consciously share yourself intimately with another being, you are not merely exchanging fluids or fleeting feelings. You are, in essence, exchanging vibrational frequencies. You are merging distinct energetic fields, intentionally opening energetic channels, and consciously trading access to your most sensitive spiritual systems. And whether or not you're consciously aware of it, your physical body, and especially your subtle energetic body, keeps meticulous score. These energetic imprints can either uplift and nourish you on multiple levels, or they can subtly cloud and confuse you, leaving you feeling diminished and depleted. And yet, tragically, no one actively teaches you this crucial information. They superficially claim that sex is merely a personal choice, simple chemistry, or a fleeting moment in time. But no moment that inherently involves profound energetic exchange can ever be truly considered just a moment. It echoes through time, subtly influencing your future experiences. In ancient spiritual teachings, sexual union was intentionally understood as a profoundly karmic act, not in a punitive or moralistic sense, but in a purely energetic one. Karma is not merely punishment or reward, it's energetic memory, constant motion, and perpetual resonance. And sex is undeniably one of the fastest, most potent means of generating it. Because in those moments of heightened openness, when the aura naturally softens, the perceived boundaries blur, and the heart is exposed and vulnerable, you inevitably become deeply receptive. If the energy consciously exchanged is clear, present, and aligned with your highest good, it profoundly nourishes you. However, if it's burdened by unresolved shame, systemic repression, manipulative intent, or lingering unhealed trauma, it inherently transmits far more than just physical touch. It transmits pain, it transmits confusion, and it transmits subtle energetic distortions. And those subtle transmissions don't simply fade away the moment the lights are switched off. You may inexplicably find yourself drawn to individuals you logically know are not genuinely beneficial for you. You may unconsciously replay certain moments, feelings, or sensations without actively choosing to. You may feel inexplicably stuck in recurring cycles that defy rational explanation because a significant portion of your inherent energy remains subtly entangled in a past connection. This isn't an indication of inherent weakness. It's simply a reflection of your energetic wiring. Energetic cords don't necessarily require your conscious consent to form. They often emerge automatically when your energetic field is open and receptive. And sex, by its very nature, opens you up faster and more profoundly than virtually anything else. But here's a liberating truth they actively discouraged you from understanding. You absolutely possess the inherent ability to consciously clear those detrimental cords, to heal those lingering energetic imprints, and to reclaim all the fragmented aspects of yourself that were inadvertently left behind in past entanglements. However, it all begins with fundamentally understanding what you're actually doing on an energetic level. When you consciously merge with another individual, you're not merely engaging with their physical body. You are, in effect, encountering their entire history, their accumulated wounds, their deepest desires, and their unique karmic imprints. You are consciously inviting in not merely who they outwardly appear to be, but everything they carry within, and they, in turn, are doing the exact same with you. This is precisely why sex is never merely casual, not because it's inherently wrong or morally reprehensible, but because it is, at its very core, inherently sacred. And sacred things, by their very nature, are never truly shallow or inconsequential. Sacred things inevitably leave echoes. They create ripples. They leave lasting imprints. And once you fundamentally grasp this profound truth, your conscious choices will inevitably begin to shift towards greater alignment. You'll consciously move from unconscious reaction to mindful intention, from impulsive behavior to deliberate awareness. You'll start making discerning choices with greater clarity, with deeper care, and with conscious awareness. It's not about rigid abstinence or pervasive guilt. It's about authentic sovereignty, conscious ownership of your energetic field and responsible stewardship of your inherent life force. Because you are not merely a physical being, you are fundamentally a vibrational being. And every connection you form is, in essence, a conscious collaboration of distinct vibrational frequencies. When you consciously understand this, you'll inevitably stop viewing sex as a form of conquest or mere entertainment and begin perceiving it instead as a potent act of conscious co-creation. You'll intuitively ask yourself, what are we actively building with this shared energy? What are we intentionally invoking, consciously exchanging, deliberately dissolving or birthing into the world through this conscious act? Some connections are consciously designed to teach us valuable lessons, to mirror our hidden shadows, and to reflect our own unconscious blind spots. Others consciously arrive to assist us in profound healing. Some feel undeniably karmic because, in fact, they are karmic, consciously designed to burn away old dysfunctional patterns, freeing us to move forward. But none of them are inherently meaningless. Every conscious union, whether it lasts for a single night or for an entire lifetime, represents a thread within the intricate web of your ongoing becoming. And the more consciously aware you become of what each unique thread inherently carries, the greater freedom you gain to consciously shape the unfolding tapestry of your own life. When you bring heightened consciousness to your sexual choices, you inevitably stop unconsciously leaking precious energy. You stop needlessly carrying what isn't authentically yours to carry. You stop confusing fleeting chemistry for long-term compatibility or momentary pleasure for enduring truth. You begin to perceive sex not merely as a source of fleeting joy, but as a reflection of your own inner state, a tangible measure of how whole or fragmented you currently are. And through this heightened awareness, something truly remarkable happens. You begin to heal yourself, not through enforced avoidance or rigid repression, but through conscious presence. By consciously reclaiming your inherent energy from every place it was unconsciously given away in the past. Because sex is never just sex. It is, in reality, a powerful mirror, a potent portal, a transformative ritual, and a lasting karmic imprint. The fundamental question, therefore, isn't whether it will inevitably affect you. The fundamental question is whether you are consciously ready to allow it to affect you consciously, rather than unconsciously. Whether you are willing to allow it to be a profound teacher, not merely a fleeting temptation. And whether you will consciously utilize it to lose yourself in superficiality, or to intentionally find all the fragmented aspects of yourself you never even knew were patiently waiting to be consciously discovered. Long before the advent of language, before the formation of limiting beliefs, before the construction of artificial borders, there was and continues to be polarity. Two fundamental forces eternally dancing through all of nature, the magnetic pull of inherent opposites, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, stillness and dynamic flow. Every ancient tradition that consciously studied the spiritual nature of reality intrinsically understood this fundamental principle. It wasn't merely about man and woman. It was about the universal interplay of energy, two distinct currents that, when consciously united, mirrored the dynamic, creative rhythm of the cosmos itself. Sexual union is not merely about physical bodies coming together, it's about those ancient forces consciously merging and harmonizing. When consciously approached, it consciously becomes a reenactment of the original act of creation, the initial divine split consciously seeking wholeness once again. But we, as a collective, have largely forgotten this profound truth. In the incessant noise of modern culture, in the pervasive obsession with superficial identity politics, in the proliferation of pornified imagery, and in the prevalence of detached desire, we've inadvertently collapsed this universal dance into a rigid, often hostile misunderstanding of the authentic masculine and feminine principles. We've artificially reduced it to superficial gender roles, to bitter power struggles, and to limiting stereotypes. We've inaccurately portrayed the masculine as inherently aggressive, emotionally disconnected, and profoundly numb. We've equally inaccurately portrayed the feminine as inherently submissive, perpetually chaotic, or overtly sexualized. And in consciously doing so, we've distorted the very energies that innately reside within each and every one of us. You consciously carry both. Everyone inherently does. The inherent masculine energy within you embodies the archetypes of mindful presence, intentional stillness, clear direction, unwavering focus, and unwavering discipline. The inherent feminine energy within you embodies the dynamic currents of emotion, profound intuition, boundless creativity, sensual awareness, and fluid flow. These aren't merely abstract traits, they are tangible, energetic realities. And when they consciously exist in a state of harmonious balance within you, your external relationships will inevitably reflect that inner harmony. However, when they are actively in conflict, you will unconsciously attract chaos, persistent confusion, and the painful repetition of dysfunctional patterns. This is precisely why the individuals you are consciously drawn to sexually, emotionally, and even spiritually often reflect the imbalances you carry within yourself. The masculine outside of you will invariably expose your own conscious relationship with your own inherent inner masculine. The feminine you desire or fear will invariably mirror how deeply you've consciously accepted or rejected your own inherent feminine essence. This is the sacred mirror, consciously reflecting your own inner state. Sexual attraction is never random, arbitrary, or coincidental. It's fundamentally vibrational. It's magnetically driven. It's a powerful reflection of the inherent inner dance, consciously seeking balance or conscious resolution. And when that profound dance is consciously met with authentic awareness, something truly extraordinary happens. Union becomes not merely a superficial form of fleeting connection, but a catalyst for profound alchemical transformation. The physical body consciously transforms into a sacred vessel. The heart consciously becomes an altar for divine communion, and sex consciously becomes a living prayer. Not a prayer to another individual, but a heartfelt prayer to the intrinsic balance of life itself. In Tantra, this conscious dynamic is often referred to as the sacred marriage, the intentional merging of the inner Shiva and Shakti coming into harmonious resonance. It's not a whimsical fantasy, it's not a contrived performance. It's a conscious return to authentic wholeness. When a conscious masculine essence intentionally meets a conscious feminine essence in an environment of mutual reverence, authentic safety, and conscious presence, energy consciously begins to circulate in a fundamentally different manner. It consciously rises instead of unconsciously leaking away. It consciously nourishes instead of unconsciously depleting. The conscious act becomes inherently sacred, not because it is artificially rare or unattainable, but because it is consciously real, authentic, and grounded in truth. And yet, most individuals tragically never experience this elevated state of being, not because they consciously don't want to, but simply because they were never consciously shown how to do so. No one intentionally taught them to consciously listen to energy, to consciously feel polarity, or to consciously differentiate between chemistry born of unhealed trauma and chemistry born of authentic truth. So they inevitably confuse fleeting excitement for authentic alignment. They superficially chase intensity and falsely label it connection. And in the conscious process, they invariably miss the deeper invitation, the inherent invitation to heal themselves, to consciously harmonize their internal energies, and to intentionally meet another individual from a place of consciously integrated power rather than from a state of unconscious, fragmented craving. This is the transformative potential of conscious sexual union when it is consciously seen for what it truly represents. The sacred moment where the universal polarities of creation converge within two human forms. The tangible moment when the illusion of separation begins to dissolve, not merely as an abstract ideology, but as an embodied, authentic experience. The body inherently knows what the conscious mind has long forgotten. The energy inherently knows the path to conscious homecoming. But for that profound homecoming to consciously occur, you must intentionally stop performing and consciously start feeling. You must consciously let go of what you think you are consciously supposed to be and consciously tune into what you inherently are at your deepest level. You must consciously honor the inherent masculine energy within you enough to stand in conscious presence and consciously honor the inherent feminine energy within you enough to consciously surrender into authentic truth. When both energies are consciously held, consciously seen, and consciously expressed in harmonious balance, you don't merely meet another individual. You consciously meet your own authentic self fully and honestly. And when two individuals consciously arrive in that sacred space together, sex consciously becomes something else entirely. Not merely a need to be superficially fulfilled, not a superficial game to be superficially played, not a temporary escape from reality, but a profound ritual, a sacred reunion, because the inherent masculine and feminine energies were never consciously meant to exist in perpetual conflict with each other. They were inherently meant to consciously dance in harmonious rhythm, to consciously pull each other into deeper states of becoming, to consciously remind each other of the profound cosmic truth we have all to some extent forgotten, that within every authentic union lies the profound possibility of divine remembrance. The question, therefore, is this: can you consciously see past the superficial surface long enough to consciously feel it? There are undeniably certain moments during profound intimacy when the physical body softens, the breath naturally slows, and the ego consciously falls silent, where something truly indescribable inevitably occurs. You consciously forget where you end and where the other individual consciously begins. The illusion of linear time subtly dissolves, incessant thoughts consciously disappear, and all that consciously remains is pure, unadulterated presence, pure awareness of the eternal now. In those profoundly sacred moments, if you've ever genuinely experienced them, you weren't merely experiencing superficial pleasure. You were, in essence, touching the very edge of the eternal, catching a profound glimpse of something ancient, timeless, and infinite, something your soul consciously recognizes, but your conscious mind was never properly trained to consciously name. This isn't mere fantasy, it's not mere idealism. It's the unseen dimension of conscious union, the sacred current that intentionally runs beneath the superficial surface of sex and that no one ever consciously taught you to consciously look for. Sex has always inherently possessed the potential to offer far more than mere fleeting stimulation. It can offer authentic transcendence, but only when it's consciously stripped of conscious performance, unrealistic expectations, and unconscious dysfunctional patterns. Because what consciously stands in the way of that profounder experience isn't fundamentally your physical body. It's consciously your mind. It's the limiting stories you consciously carry, the societal conditioning you've consciously internalized, the pervasive need to consciously please or to constantly prove yourself, to consciously dominate or to unconsciously disappear, the persistent ache to be consciously wanted, the pervasive fear of potential rejection, and the lingering ghosts of past lovers. All of those conscious and unconscious elements consciously sit squarely between you and the profound, transformative experience that sex, at its highest conscious frequency, can potentially become. But when those superficial layers consciously begin to fall away, something truly transformative inevitably reveals itself. You consciously begin to feel inherent energy intentionally moving not merely between physical bodies but also consciously moving through the surrounding space. You consciously begin to sense the palpable presence of something far larger and far more profound than simply the two of you. Call it spirit, source, God, or the universal field of infinite potential. In the ancient texts, it's often described as the third energy, the transformative energy that consciously emerges not simply from one individual or the other, but consciously from the conscious merging of both. It is the very energy of creation itself. And when you intentionally allow yourself to consciously drop fully into it, you consciously realize you're not actually losing yourself. You're, in effect, consciously finding the authentic self that consciously exists far beyond the superficial mask. That's precisely why certain individuals accurately describe moments of profound intimacy as undeniably spiritual, because in truth they truly are not in a dogmatic religious sense, but in a profound, energetic, embodied, experiential sense. The conscious veil thins, the insidious illusion of separation consciously begins to crack and crumble. And for a fleeting moment, however brief it might be, you consciously feel what mystics have consciously spent entire lifetimes consciously chasing: profound unity, pure oneness, the direct, undeniable experience that there is no fundamental you and me, only us, only this, only now. This is the profound potential of sex when it consciously becomes conscious, when it is no longer primarily about superficially chasing climax, but intentionally entering into conscious communion. When mindful presence consciously takes the rightful place of unconscious performance and conscious intention consciously replaces unconscious impulse. And in that consciously created space, you don't merely feel temporarily good. You consciously feel authentically whole, deeply free, and fundamentally at home within yourself. But here's a crucial element that is often profoundly misunderstood. The superficial physical act isn't the conscious cause of that profound, transformative feeling. It's simply the catalyst, the conscious gateway to a deeper truth. The real, lasting transformation is actively occurring within the inherent energy, in the conscious surrender, and within the responsive network of the nervous system, consciously softening enough to consciously let authentic love in, and cultivating the conscious willingness to be consciously seen and to consciously see another individual beyond the superficial confines of mere physical form. The physical body is, in essence, the doorway. The ultimate destination is always the soul. And yet, tragically, most individuals never consciously venture that far, not because they inherently can't, but because they've been unconsciously taught to consciously seek less, to consciously remain on the superficial surface, to consciously reduce sex to a mere release, to treat it solely as a transactional experience, and to consciously keep it superficially wrapped in limiting roles and unrealistic expectations. But the soul inherently doesn't consciously respond to artificial roles. It doesn't consciously awaken during a contrived performance. It consciously awakens solely in the conscious presence of authentic vulnerability and embodied truth. Real, authentic union consciously asks you to consciously drop the superficial masks, to consciously allow the heart to consciously lead the way, to consciously feel every sensation, every emotion, every wave of energy. Not as something to consciously control or rigidly suppress, but as something to consciously ride with grace and intention. And in that conscious surrender, you inevitably begin to consciously dissolve the superficial identity you stubbornly cling to, and the pervasive need to rigidly be this or that consciously start to melt away. And what remains is simply conscious being, just breath, just conscious awareness, intentionally moving through the vessel of form. Two conscious individuals consciously remembering together what it genuinely feels like to consciously exist far beyond the limiting confines of linear time. This is the forgotten potential of conscious sexual intimacy, not as a mere physical reward, but as a profound spiritual doorway, not just to each other, but consciously to the infinite potential that consciously resides within. And once you've consciously touched it, once you've consciously felt that life-affirming current consciously flowing through your conscious being, you consciously can never quite revert to consciously seeing sex in the superficial way the world consciously taught you to view it, because you'll inevitably know, consciously and undeniably know, that consciously hidden within the most primal instinctual act is the most sacred, profound truth. That authentic union at its deepest, most conscious level consciously reveals the illusory nature of separation, that consciously reflected behind the eyes of another conscious being is a profound reflection of yourself. And through them, in that conscious moment, you consciously meet the inherent divine. Once upon a time, sex was not unnaturally separated from spirit. It was intentionally revered as an intrinsic part of it. Entire systems of profound knowledge were meticulously built around this fundamental truth, not as mere myth or abstract metaphor, but as tangible, consciously lived reality. In ancient temples across continents and diverse cultures, sacred sexuality was intentionally taught and consciously practiced as a profound form of divine communion. It was fundamentally understood that to consciously access the highest possible levels of expanded consciousness, one had to consciously begin with the inherent wisdom of the physical body, not to consciously reject or deny it. One had to consciously understand energy, polarity, the power of the breath, the necessity of conscious intention, and the absolute importance of embodied presence. And they consciously understood that when those powerful forces were consciously combined with reverence, respect, and mindful awareness, sex could consciously become a profoundly spiritual tool, a transformative ritual, and a conscious transmission of wisdom too subtle and nuanced to be consciously conveyed through mere words. But that invaluable knowledge didn't simply disappear by mere accident. It was consciously buried, deliberately suppressed by those who sought to control the narrative. Across the vast span of human history, specific institutions rose to prominence that viewed expanded consciousness not as something to be liberated, but as something to be rigidly controlled. The very moment sex became consciously recognized as something inherently sacred, it consciously became immensely powerful. And power in the wrong hands, as defined by those in control, is always perceived as a threat to the established order. So instead of consciously elevating that profound power, they consciously demonized it. They consciously rewrote the narrative, subtly twisting the meaning of ancient sacred practices. They cynically turned conscious sacred rites into mortal sins. They maliciously twisted ancient, invaluable teachings into insidious taboos. Entire cultures were systematically colonized, and with them their vast wealth of indigenous spiritual technologies. What was consciously once considered a sacred temple practice was consciously twisted into a form of perversion. What was once a healing practice was consciously rebranded as heresy. And what was once a potent path to conscious liberation was consciously weaponized as a source of debilitating shame. Look more closely and you'll consciously see the profound evidence scattered throughout the annals of recorded time. Ancient tantric texts either consciously hidden away or maliciously distorted. Authentic Gnostic gospels intentionally burned. The female body systematically vilified. The powerful priestess consciously erased from history. And the serpentance, a revered symbol of Kundalini. The potent coiled energy at the base of the spine consciously transformed into a sinister symbol of unmitigated evil. The very same serpent that ascends up the spine during the sacred process of conscious spiritual awakening was maliciously rebranded as the embodiment of temptation, a brilliant, insidious inversion consciously designed to make people fear the very energy that inherently possessed the potential to consciously set them free. The transformative teachings that once consciously guided people to awaken through their own inherent inner union were systematically replaced with rigid doctrine. Worship was consciously moved away from the inherent inner temple of self and artificially projected onto external idols, artificially shifting the focus away from conscious embodiment and projected instead onto blind obedience, shifting the emphasis away from direct conscious experience and consciously projecting it onto the embrace of blind faith. And as a direct result, humanity consciously forgot its inherent power, not because we were inherently broken or fundamentally flawed, but simply because we were consciously led away from our own truth with calculated precision. We consciously inherited the profound confusion of those who came before us. And most individuals tragically never consciously question this pervasive narrative. Most simply accept the conscious distortion as the natural state of affairs and consciously live within its artificially imposed constraints, unconsciously numb, profoundly disconnected, and consciously convinced that sex is either a fleeting, guilty pleasure or a profoundly meaningless routine. But the inherent teachings were never consciously and completely lost. They consciously survived in fragmented form, consciously whispered throughout carefully guarded lineages, consciously encoded within sacred texts, and consciously symbolized within symbols that have been largely misunderstood by the mainstream consciousness. The Hermetic principles, for example, still consciously hold valuable clues. The Kabbalion consciously speaks of conscious polarity, inherent rhythm, vibrational frequencies, and the power of mentalism, all of which inherently and directly apply to the alchemical practice of sacred sexuality. These aren't merely abstract ideas, they are profound blueprints. They consciously explain how energy moves, how authentic balance is intentionally restored, and how thoughts create and shape tangible forms. And when you consciously read them through the lens of conscious sacred sexuality, everything you previously knew consciously transforms. You consciously begin to consciously see how ancient wisdom was subtly encoded, cleverly hidden in plain sight for those conscious individuals who were genuinely ready to remember, because conscious remembering is the conscious key to unlocking your true potential. You don't fundamentally need any novel information. What you truly need is to consciously strip away all the superfluous noise and consciously reconnect with what you already inherently know, but may have unconsciously forgotten. Your physical body consciously remembers. Your inherent energy consciously remembers. That's precisely why, even after prolonged and pervasive programming, there consciously remains a persistent part of you that consciously longs for something far deeper and more meaningful. That persistent ache isn't merely about superficial intimacy. It's fundamentally about conscious integration. It's your inherent soul consciously attempting to communicate through all the static interference. Consciously attempting to consciously show you that sexuality isn't merely a detour along your spiritual path, but is, in truth, a fundamentally central part of it. And yes, there will undoubtedly be conscious resistance. Centuries of deeply ingrained shame and pervasive suppression don't magically dissolve overnight. You may consciously experience feelings of guilt. You may consciously experience feelings of fear. That's perfectly normal. But those fleeting feelings aren't signs to simply consciously stop. They are clear indications that you're consciously touching the very edge of the lie. You're consciously leaning directly into the membrane of the limiting programming, and consciously waiting on the other side is your... So, in essence, the journey back to sacred sexuality is a journey back to yourself. It's about reclaiming the power that was always yours, remembering the wisdom encoded within your very being, and understanding that sex, at its core, is not something to be feared or dismissed, but a potent force for healing, growth, and profound connection. It's an invitation to consciously create a life where your sexuality is integrated, honored, and celebrated as the beautiful, powerful expression of spirit that it truly is. What resonates most deeply with you from this exploration? I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or experiences in the comments below. Let's create a space for open and honest conversation about reclaiming the sacred within our sexuality. And if you found this insightful, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos exploring these transformative topics. Let's continue this journey of awakening together.